today we're at about 7,000 cheetahs in 33 populations, and 20 of those populations are under 100 individuals. So you already have a species that's genetically compromised, and then when you have so few cheetahs in some of these populations, breeding to extinction.
I'm Jason Miller. I'm one of the animal keepers here at the Museum of Science, and with me today is Dr. Laurie Marker, cheetah expert and founder of the Cheetah Conservation Fund. Dr. Marker has spent over 40 years of her life dedicated to conserving cheetahs, educating people about them, and learning as much as she can about these mysterious and deeply imperiled animals. Dr. Laurie Marker, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm very curious, Dr. Marker, how somebody goes from making wine and cheese in beautiful California and Oregon to saving cheetahs in Namibia. And as an extension of that, what made you choose Namibia as your base of operations?
Well, I went to school in agriculture, and I grew up with animals and was supposed to be a veterinarian. But instead, I ended up in wine making school and grape making school in Davis instead of vet school, and had an opportunity of pioneering the Oregon wine industry. So I think I've been a pioneer my whole life. And from that, developed the third bonded winery in Oregon, but needed a job to support my business. And with my background in animals, went to the wildlife safari and managed their veterinary clinic. And this was back in the 70s, where we didn't even have veterinarians back in those days. So as a veterinary technician, I learned from all the veterinarians how to take care of the animals. And that's how I ended up getting involved with cheetahs. When I saw a cheetah, I wanted to know everything about them, and found out nobody knew anything about them. And so ended up taking on as my mission to let the world know about cheetahs, and then realized that we needed to save the species.
That's outstanding. Because you could have very easily saw that, there's not a lot of information out there on cheetahs. I'm going to specialize in something that we already have base knowledge of. That might be a little bit easier. You chose the blank slate. Says, all right, I got cheetahs covered. I'll take care of this species. Cheetahs have been a pretty big part of your life. I think that's fair to say. But there was one cheetah in particular that got you kind of started on this journey, Khayam. Could you tell us a little bit about Khayam and your relationship with her?
Well, Khayam was a very special cheetah. I always say she gave me a vision and showed me the path to help save the species. So she had actually been born in captivity in Oregon. I was in Oregon where I ran a wildlife park there called the Wildlife Safari. This was in the early 70s. And her parents had just come in from Namibia, Southwest Africa, and the last import of cheetahs into the country at the time when CITES, the Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species, first started.
Oh, wow.
50 years ago. But with that, that actually stopped all of the export of animals out of the wild to zoos. But cheetahs were very interesting. There were very few of them in captivity in the world, and they don't breed well in captivity. So the fact that she had actually been born in captivity under my care of running the captive program for cheetahs at the Wildlife Safari. But she had to be hand-raised. And as a few months went down the line, all of a sudden I was told, you are going to go over to Africa with Khayam and you're going to teach her how to hunt. Because back in the early days, zoos were trying to breed animals, started cooperating together. And our vision at that point was we were going to genetically manage our animals in captivity and put them back out into the wild. But you have to have a pioneer to learn what needs to be done. And I was that pioneer with Khayam. So I raised Khayam from a young cub. And when she was a little over a year old, I found myself in Namibia, Southwest Africa, teaching her how to hunt, of which she learned how to hunt. I learned how to hunt. But what we found was that farmers in Namibia were killing cheetahs like flies. Hundreds of cheetahs each year because they thought that they were a perceived threat to their livestock. Some may have been actual, but I was just fascinated and thought the world really needs to know that we are losing cheetahs in the wild, and they're an animal that does not do all that well in captivity. And we need help. The cheetah needs help. So that's the story of Khayam, and she led me down this path. The more I learned about her, the more I learned that these animals really needed a lot of help.
So behaviorally, what would you compare a cheetah to? Are they kind of like house cats? Are they a little more on the dog side? Or are they their own creature with their own special quirks?
I would say they're their own creature with their own special quirks. However, they do have some cat-like behaviors. They love to chase things. Dog-wise, the only thing that's really similar to a dog might be their long, lanky body and their semi-non-retractable dog-like claws. And
Not retractable, so they're always out.
they're always out, semi-non-retractable.
And does that help with traction?
That does. That helps them go speeds of up to 70 miles an hour.
That's incredible.
Built-in track shoes.
That's amazing.
So yeah, cheetahs are very unique, I would say, but cat-like. They are the smallest of the big cats, and they are the most endangered of all of our big cats or cats in all of Africa.
Were the farmers' concerns valid as far as you could tell then? Like, were the cheetahs actively going after their livestock, or was it maybe a case of mistaken identity with other predators in the area?
Well, I then, in the storyline, I wanted to find out more, whether it was actual or perceived. And so after many more years of doing a whole lot of other things for cheetahs here in America, and Namibia got its independence, I actually packed my bags to go to Namibia. And that's when I set up the Cheetah Conservation Fund. But really what I wanted to do is to find out, were they really eating that much livestock that you would kill 800 to 900 cheetahs a year? And the answer is no. So in that 10-year period of time, really in the 1980s, the Namibian farmers had killed out almost 10,000 cheetahs. And today's world population of cheetahs is less than 7,000. So they had a significant consequences for the cheetah. And I wanted to know why they were killing so many. And obviously, well, I'm a livestock farmer, so I grew up with my livestock. I'm a dairy goat farmer and grew up on the back of my horse. So I am, very well trained with our livestock as well. And I thought, man, I wouldn't want to lose that much livestock. Are they losing that much? Or they maybe have some problems with their management? And I went door to door and I talked with the farmers more about their systems, how they farmed, how big their farms were. Their farms were huge. And they really weren't managing their livestock to the best as they could. And then there was a perceived thought that if you see a cheetah, catch a cheetah, kill a cheetah. So kind of putting all those things together, realized that a lot of the problems for the cheetah was more that they were just catching them and killing them. However, that was causing them more problems because if you take a cheetah out of its home range and its territory, more animals come in, and it's kind of like a vacuum. So the farmers that were catching and killing cheetahs were opening up territories, and more of them were coming in from further and further away. So it was pretty interesting to learn so much about that in the early days. I basically wrote the book on cheetahs' ecology and how they live on the lands, and actually got the farmers to allow me to put radio collars on the cheetahs if they caught them, and instead of killing them, most of the time, they allowed me to collar them and allowed me to learn a lot more about their movement through the livestock farmlands. And that helped the farmers learn a lot more about how cheetahs were living, and then started looking at how to help the farmers live more in harmony with nature versus fighting nature.
That's beautiful. How was that received when you first showed up at these farmers' doors? Was it generally, were they open to the idea of maybe the cheetahs can be preserved rather than killed? Or did it take a little convincing on your part?
Well, I had been there in the middle 70s, and I moved there in the 90s, and in between I kept coming and going back to Namibia. So people had heard about me. It's a very big country. Namibia is about 2.5 times the size of California. And so it's quite large with a low human population density. And getting anywhere, you have to travel very far distances. So I'd meet up with farmers at their farmers' meetings, and I had a reputation about this lady had come to Namibia with a cheetah, a young lady from America, and the farmers thought, who is this crazy person who likes cheetahs? We hate cheetahs. Take them all back to America with you. It's like, well, no, there's laws that don't allow me to do that. And you're so lucky. You have cheetahs living on your land. The whole world will be happy to know that you're helping take care of them. If you can notice my approach in a very positive way. And I asked them, after learning about how they lived with them and how they saw cheetahs and how many they'd caught and how many they'd killed and where their wildlife was and where their livestock was and if they had livestock losses and if they had problems with the cheetah, I then explained to them more about the cheetah. And at this point, I'd been studying the cheetahs for over 15 years or more. We looked at the genetic makeup of the cheetah and found that the cheetah actually lacks genetic diversity, looking at a lot of reproductive abnormalities, disease problems. And knowing that the wild population was very, very, very important. But I explained all of this to the farmers after they told me everything about how they farmed. And then I asked them what would be needed for them to help me help save the cheetah on their land with them. So that was interesting because they actually laid out all of our programs. They said, well, we never really thought about any of this. We really don't know anything about the cheetah. We just know that our fathers and grandfathers had told us to get rid of every predator. And they had no idea about how the cheetah lived. And they said, we really need to know more about how it's living on our land. And they thought that there were hundreds of cheetahs on their farms. Our long-term research, collaring them and putting them back out in the wild, showed that they're covering 15 or more farms, each of those about 10,000 acres. So they've got huge home ranges, one of the largest ranges of any animal in the world. Then they said, and we've been isolated in this country. Namibia had just gone through a big revolutionary war, I guess, getting their independence from South Africa, which was interesting and controversial at that right. But they said, we've been so isolated, we have no environmental education. Help teach our kids more about the environment. And we're all livestock farmers, but we never went to school to learn about taking care of our livestock. Yeah, you're a goat judge, and you went to school learning about livestock. Maybe you could help us with our livestock management. So that is really how I got started. And we developed a whole educational program for school kids. We developed an entire educational program for livestock farmers. We call it Future Farmers of Africa. I grew up as an FFA-er here in America. And then, of course, our ecology program. But I wanted also to know more about the biology of the cheetah. We knew really nothing about it. As I had mentioned, we'd had animals that had come in the 70s. The cheetahs did not breed well in captivity, and so most of the animals were not necessarily healthy. And back in those days, we had not studied much about the wildlife in the wild. And so I had a great opportunity of getting my hands on, now, as I said, over nearly 2,000 cheetahs, and collected blood, tissues, looked at their genetics, looked at their scat, looked at what they were eating, and was able to actually, again, put all of the information together and share this with the world. So the farmers helped us plan what to do.
They kind of helped you help them.
Yes.
That's fantastic.
It was pretty
That's
amazing.
kind of the dream. And was there anything like this in place in Namibia before your organization started?
No, and really no things like this in the world, basically. As I started out in the early 90s in Namibia, it was the first predator program outside of a protected area. Prior to that, I think people were studying wildlife in national parks. And so they'd look at them with binoculars and say, oh, aren't they beautiful? Look, there's 20 animals there. There's 100 animals there. But you can't learn as much about the animals as you can if you have your hands on them. And I was trained moving from my work in Oregon to the Smithsonian and the National Zoo. and was trained in the early work of, collecting, banking, saving, and utilizing any animal you have your hand on for the best science possible. And so we have one of the largest databases of any endangered species pretty much in the world. We banked down the sperm of all the wild males that we had our hands on, of course, at best practice. And much of the work that we have done has been, again, in cooperation with the livestock farmers, in cooperation with the government. But the government had no money. And it was a new government, again, a breakaway, independent from South Africa. And at that point in time, wildlife was really not their main focus. They were looking at, people in poverty, housing, healthcare, all those issues, education that needed to be put into place in a new nation. So all of a sudden, somebody coming in being a cheetah scientist was rather interesting for them.
I'm sure.
But
You mentioned a lack of genetic diversity that you found through your research. What exactly does that mean as far as their conservation and their population? Is it resulting in a lack of fertility, or is it just not enough diversity to deal with diseases and things like that?
all of the above.
Mhm.
So the cheetah actually escaped the Pleistocene extinction, which is about 12 to 15,000 years ago, which we don't know all that much about, other than here in North America, we lost animals like the sloth bear, the mammoth, and many of the other large saber-toothed cats. But we also lost the cheetah from North America because it had worldwide distribution. And our theory basically being is that a small number remained someplace in either Asia or Africa and repopulated their range. And that was, again, over the next 12 to 15,000 years. But they all came from a very, very small bloodline, a handful of them. And that's where the cheetah is today. So it's very genetically similar, and it does affect their reproduction. And as years go by, maybe 10, 15 years ago, we then sequenced the cheetah's genome and has started looking at many of the different aspects of questions that we have. And one of those was the reproduction. And we found that the genetics is actually affecting their reproduction. And how does that really affect, genetically? And people quite often maybe don't see that. But the health of an animal is not just how many there are, but it is the health of the animal. So we'd seen between 70 to 80% abnormal sperm. And then these other problems also were being looked at as we look at the disease aspect. So they lack the immune system. And we found some pretty bad outbreaks of diseases and viruses. And if they actually caught a certain virus, you'd have 100% mortality. And one of those was the feline infectious peritonitis, which is a cat disease. It's actually from the coronavirus, feline coronavirus. So those are some of the problems facing the cheetah that we learned much more about. Not only were their ranges constricted, but as your range constriction occurs, you end up with fragmentation. Then the populations became smaller. So today we're at about 7,000 cheetahs in 33 populations, and 20 of those populations are under 100 individuals. So you already have a species that's genetically compromised, and then when you have so few cheetahs, they're actually inbreeding, and so they're, in some of these populations, breeding to extinction.
Interesting.
So one of the big things is to try to maximize them and maintain them and not allow any more to die off so that you can have enough genetic diversity.
Preventing them from breeding for their conservation is kind of interesting. But it makes sense.
Well, you
when it
want them
comes
to
to
be
that.
breeding,
Breeding, but not inbreeding.
not
ideally,
inbreeding.
right.
And so those small populations need augmentation.
Mhm.
And that's a big part of the future. So
Interesting. I want to talk more about that in a second. I was pretty astounded when I checked out a map of where cheetahs historically ranged. India, the Middle East, and all throughout Africa. And then today, like you said, these little isolated patches. So is part of the solution to kind of rearrange their locations and like kind of mix and match so there's more genetic diversity
That makes a lot of sense. But then
that
you
you
have
come
to
up with?
add into politics.
Oh, politics. I always forget about that.
In the wild, animals don't have borders, so they can actually cross borders as they wish. But when you look at trying to augment populations like that, there has to be programs in place. And so the cheetah did go extinct through over half of its countries just within the last 100 years. So this extinction process is well within, a little bit more than our lifetimes, but a very short period of time that we've seen the population decline. So in India, they went extinct 70 years ago. In the Middle East, just in the 1970s, actually, which is not all that long ago either. And the populations just continued to decline. Right now, the last of the Asian cheetahs are in Iran, and there are maybe a dozen there. And then there's a Northwest African subspecies, which were in Algeria and Niger, areas that I've worked with and studied as well. And the numbers have declined drastically to maybe only a couple hundred individuals. So they're also found in some of the most arid landscapes. So if you can think about that, you guys are here where it's beautiful and green and you have rain, but the cheetah is living in very, very, very arid lands. They're also affected these days through our climate change problems and shifting migratory areas for not only humans, but also the wildlife. And again, they're not found in protected areas.
And why is that? Why are they not found in protected areas?
Their main problem is the competition with other large predators. So in these protected areas, you have, great populations usually of lions and hyenas, leopards, but they're also much larger and more powerful than the cheetah. The cheetah is the best hunter in all the Africa, but they lose a lot of their kills to these other predators. They also, when they're having their young, the female has to leave her cub. She's dens, and the cubs are in the den for the first 6 weeks, and she has to go out and hunt. And there's a high infant mortality within the game reserves because of these other large predators. So the cheetahs actually moved out of most of these reserves, and about 80% of their remaining populations are found outside of protected areas. And on those lands, though, there is usually humans and livestock. There is wildlife, and the cheetah would prefer to have wildlife than it would livestock. But most of the people where they're living are very, very poor in most of their habitats. And so they kind of have their livestock on the hoof and keep it with them. And it's their bank account, really.
Right. What's normally on the menu for cheetahs in the wild?
Their prey is a small antelope, usually maybe about 65, 70 pounds, springbok, steenbok, Thompson's gazelles, Grant gazelles, then the young of all the other larger antelope, the young of kudu, oryx, hartebeest. They eat hare, some birds. So it's a variety, and they hunt by stalking their prey.
Okay.
And then they have to get very close to it, and then they go into a fast speed run. Of course, when the cheetah runs, it doesn't just run in one direction. It is darting back and forth and doing turns on, 1 foot with their tail as a rudder, helping them with their balance and those dog-like claws as cleats for traction. But when a cheetah runs, only 1 foot touches the ground in a 20-foot stride.
20 foot?
So all 4 feet touch the ground, but there's 2 points in that stride where they're flying through the air. And then when they're doing that, they pull out 1 foot and trip their prey. So it's pretty amazing.
I always visualized it like with other big cats, like jumping on the back and clawing and biting. They're literally slipping a foot under and tripping their prey.
Yeah.
That's kind of hilarious.
It's pretty amazing.
That's amazing.
And as they're running, they do have within their claws, because their claws are dog-like, and they're not sharp like all other cats, although they are sharp, but they have dew claws, which is kind of like a thumb. And that dew claw is very, very sharp, and that claw comes out and actually grabs their prey and helps hold their prey down.
This begs the question, how do you teach that? How did you teach Khayam to trip? Because I imagine you can't run 70 miles an hour.
Oh, I'm
So
pretty...
keeping up would be...
Not anymore. No, I raised her up running after mechanical lures. She would chase our truck with a lure pulled behind it. So she was very well trained, and all the cheetahs that we have in captivity. So where I am now, we do have a sanctuary. I've got 2 big sanctuaries with cheetahs within them that cannot go back out in the wild. But we keep them all in good health by exercising them. And so Khayam was trained to exercise, run behind fast trucks. And with that, there is an instinct. So they want to chase a moving object. Once they do, what do you do with it? But when you're living out in the middle of the wild, you sniff and smell and see other wildlife species. And so it's a trial and error. Running after their prey or whatever your prey might be, which is maybe a drag lure, they start learning that, that's what they want to chase. And when they're out in the wild, they do then, through this, start chasing an animal, and then they have to figure out, oh, I'm close to it, what do I do? And then that paw might come out. But when they're growing up, we play with lures, and so they learn to use their paws in catching the lures and things like this. So she was pretty well trained at that, and the trial and error went on for a few weeks, and she eventually got 2 and 2 together and learned how to hunt quite well.
A few weeks isn't too bad. That's
Not
pretty
bad.
impressive.
Of course, she's not ready to go back out into the wild, but she was learning. She had learned how to kill. We have then, over the years, done a lot of rehabilitation, and we have found that it usually takes a couple weeks to about a month or so before the animals that we put back out in the wild have learned how to make a kill. And then from that, it again is trial and error, and it has started to find out where they can find their prey. So usually about a month or 2 months, the animals that we've rehabilitated are actually successfully hunting in the wild. We keep monitoring them, though. Khayam had me monitoring her, and she didn't leave my side very much, so I was chasing after those antelope a bit with her. But in our other rehabilitation work, our cats are all collared. We use satellite collars, and we can follow them very carefully. We want visuals on them all the time. And with that, it allows us to help support the animals when they are out in the wild. So we've now written a lot of papers on this. With that, we are looking at these augmentation and reintroduction of cheetahs into other habitats where they become extinct or their populations are low. So we've learned a lot about the right things to do, and a lot of it is supporting these animals where rehabilitation does occur. So if they are out in the wild for a period of time and you can't, you don't just put them out and expect them to start hunting. You do have to supplementally feed them. And many people think, oh, you're going to feed them and then they're not going to hunt, and starvation will lead them to hunt. And that's really not what it's all about. You want them to be strong enough and healthy enough to be able to explore their territory. And then through trial and error, chasing, and I didn't catch it, but that was a lot of fun, finding something else that they might run into, chasing, and then maybe they catch it. Once they do that, what we have done with the animals before rehabilitation is we teach them how to open up a kill, and that is also a skill that they have to learn. And then from that, how to gorge themselves, so you have to have their stomachs enlarged from a daily captive diet. So all these things are things that, we've developed these techniques so that cheetahs can go back out into the wild.
So the first time you saw Khayam running, like full speed, reaching that 70-mile-per-hour mark, how did that feel? It must have been kind of cool.
Just amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing.
It's like seeing your kid graduate college.
Absolutely. Right. But to actually see her with those skills. I was usually on the ground, and there was a truck when we were teaching her, so I got to actually watch from the rear. And watch her just take off and run, and it's just beautiful. And as we put cheetahs back out in the wild, of course, they go out full speed. to get away from us if they're wild cheetahs.
As soon as the door opens,
They're gone.
they're gone.
Yeah, and it's pretty spectacular.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, the footage you see of cheetahs running, it's one of the most incredibly adapted animals. Like they have such a narrow visage when they're running, and I'm still thinking about that 2 feet touching the ground at
Yeah.
20 feet. That's astounding to me.
But again, I'm going to just add that into
Yeah.
another point is that they, most people don't know a cheetah from all the other spotted cats, but they have the tear marks which run down from their eyes. And those are called malar stripes, and they actually help them keep their target in focus.
Oh, interesting.
So just imagine if you're going 70 miles an hour down the highway and stick your head to the side, everything blurs. But you keep your eyes focused on the front and you can see where you're going. And those tear marks, which distinguish them from all the other spotted cats, help them keep focus on what they're hunting. So that's also a very worthwhile part of their body build.
What is their social structure like? Do they hunt in groups or pairs ever, or are they mostly solitary?
No, they were always called a solitary predator, but they're not. They grow up, they leave mother at about 18 to 22 months of age, and then they stick together as cubs, brothers and sisters, for usually another 6 months, till dominant males will come and chase the young males away. And the young males go into a dispersal pattern, and they go a couple hundred, 100 miles or more away from the mother's home range. And then the female stays within her mother's home range. So it's a maternal society. But the brothers will stay together their whole lives. It's called a coalition, and this allows them to actually form, hunt larger prey. If they hunt good prey and they're able to take over a territory that has good prey, they may be more selected for breeding purposes. And cheetah females actually have mate choice. So they will select a male that they will breed with. And within a coalition of males, usually it's only one male, one brother that does the breeding, and the other males are kind of backup. And with that, they're the ones trying to help hold that territory that the female might come in. So it's pretty interesting. Female cheetahs have about 2 to 3 times larger home ranges than the males do, which is different than most other predators, where usually it's the male is overlapping with multiple females. So the cheetahs are quite unique, but the female is with her cubs, and then her cubs leave. She usually has another litter, and then those cubs would stick together. So it's a pretty interesting social structure of which they have.
Much more complicated than I think most people would
Yes.
realize.
That's what I spent my life studying. So.
That's outstanding. I'd love to kind of dive into the Cheetah Conservation Fund as an entity and the work that you guys do, because it's really incredible. Tell us how dogs are helping save cheetahs.
I love that. We use dogs in a couple different ways. I will start with one of them being part of our research is we use dogs to help us find scat, or we call it black gold. And these are detection dogs. And so we use the dogs with our ecologists to actually, if we grid out an area, the dog can cover large areas. And what we're trying to do is to find that scat and bring it back into our genetics lab to understand more about the genetic makeup and the population. We also use dogs to protect livestock. And we breed a large breed of dog called the Anatolian Shepherd, or the Kangal dog. And we give these puppies when they're born to the livestock farmers. They're placed with livestock, and they grow up with their livestock, and they act as a deterrent to having predators come in to try to catch livestock. So a lot of people think that predators are wanton livestock catching animals, and they really are not. They want wildlife. And in much of our early research, whether it was actual or perceived, we found that most of the cheetahs all were catching and eating wildlife. And we did that through scat samples and looking under the microscope and understanding what the cheetah was eating. But with that, you need to protect your livestock. And many of the farmers were not actually taking good care of their livestock. They'd throw them out into the veld, were very rural, and they didn't have a herder. They weren't having calving season for their calves. And we were able to really take a look at what kind of needs they had. And so the breed of dog that we brought in actually has been a huge success. These dogs come from Turkey. It's called, as I said, the Kangal or Anatolian Shepherd, and they've been used for about 5,000 years. And with that, they were protecting against probably lions at that point, and bears, cheetahs were living in Turkey at that point in time too. But the dogs will go out with the herd, they mark territory, they bark very loudly. A lot of this barking is done obviously at night because that's when predators are more active. And so there's an avoidance. And the predators realize there's something big, sounds scary, and smells big with their scent that's out there, and the dogs are protecting the livestock. And so the predators will go away through avoidance. Predators don't want to get hurt. If they were to come into contact with these large dogs, the dogs are a very gentle dog, but they will fight to the finish if they have to. Wow. And they are a big dog. And so predators don't want to get hurt because if they get hurt, they can't hunt and they will die, and they know that. So through avoidance, that's protected. We see between an 80 to 100% reduction of livestock loss by having the livestock guarding dogs, not just to cheetahs, but to all predators. Predators are an important part of our ecosystem. So we like predators and we want them around. And for the cheetah, they actually feed the rest of the veld. And I always explain to the farmer that if you have cheetahs on your land and the cheetahs made a kill, the jackals will come in and eat. And then they're not going to come into your goat yard and eat your goats or sheep. And the farmers really never thought about some of the things that we teach them in our Future Farmer of Africa training programs that we put them through. But we also teach the farmers how to better take care of their livestock, how to vaccinate, how to deworm, how to trim hooves.
It almost mirrors the gray wolf story in the U.S., whereas farmers are just like, we got to just eliminate all these guys. They're taking our livestock. Only option is to get rid of them. So it's kind of interesting how history happens in the same kind of steps.
Well, our dog program actually has been used a lot here now in Colorado and Montana, and in the United States where there are predator issues, because we've been doing this now for over 30 years. And as a scientist, every animal becomes a record and a data point, and we published our work very, very successfully so that people can actually follow and track what's been done. So it's not just a theory that dogs protect the livestock, but we can show and share with you 30 years of data in the middle of Africa that's come back to America, back to the old world, Europe, throughout South America, and throughout Africa. So dogs saving cats is an old thing that people forget. And these dogs are pretty amazing. But I have to actually put a shout out here in Boston that our dog program actually started with the help from Hampshire University, Hampshire College.
Really?
And that's where the livestock guarding dog program started over 40 years ago, maybe 50. And I learned all about the dogs from them. And we had students from here who came and helped us get our program started. Kind of fun.
That's super fun. And I love that it's gone beyond cheetahs, and that researchers and that specialize in other predators are kind of seeing the success that you have had and are mirroring those methods. That has to feel good.
Yeah, and it's
That's
about numbers.
really
We've
fulfilling.
had over 800 dogs
Wow.
bred and placed. And then the farmers not only get the dog, they get us for the rest of their lives. So we've made a whole change in a country, I would say. And our country, Namibia, has made a change throughout Africa. Namibia is, I think I'm very proud of Namibia. After being there from its independence in 1990, but we've developed wildlife programs that have gone, I think, global. We work closely with communities on community-based programs where communities are a part of the system, our integrated programs where in most places you think that wildlife lives in protected areas and your livestock's in your pastures. In Namibia, we have an integrated system. Our livestock lives on the same lands as our wildlife do. And we protect our rangelands and have enough grazing. We protect our livestock so that there's enough wildlife. And if you have wildlife and you protect your livestock, you can have predators on the system, and then we have more biodiversity. And then through ecotourism, more people are going to come into your country and want to see the wildlife. And those are the programs that really affect livelihoods for the people wanting to live in harmony with nature.
Everybody wins.
We like win-win-win.
That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Save the cheetah, change the world.
Oh, I love that. I need that on a shirt.
I like that.
Can I just run through some like easy cheetah questions,
Sure.
like little cheetah trivia stuff, so we can get some? Because I am curious, what does a cheetah sound like? Do they roar like other cats do?
Cheetahs do not roar. They have a bubble and a chirp and a purr and a growl. They're the only big cat that does purr. And their bird-like chirp is really how they call each other mostly. And that's a pretty interesting sound when you hear a adult cheetah chirping like a bird. And so mother would chirp to her cubs, males will chirp to each other. It's high-pitched and it can be heard quite a distance away.
Interesting. So we talked a little about the black spots on other eyes, helping them hunt. What about the spots? Is it like cheetah, or like leopards rather, where it's used for camouflage?
Well, all the cheetah is, the spots on the cheetah are part of their camouflage. Unlike a leopard, the leopard has what are called rosettas, and that's usually a black circle with yellow dots in between. And the cheetah has polka dots, basically, all around. But every cheetah's spot pattern is different, and it's pretty interesting. They have, then at the end of their tail, they have stripes and usually a white tip at the end of their tail.
You see their tails kind of waving around as they run. Is that like a rudder? Is that helping them steer?
Absolutely. And it's very powerful, and it'll whip around, and actually they can change directions very rapidly from that. So it's pretty interesting how their bodies are built.
I'm sure. They must have pretty strong muscle and bone density, because they're skinny little things,
They have,
but they got a lot of power behind them.
they do. Their muscles are amazing. And long and lanky, very lightweight bones, and yet their muscles are really what keeps everything going.
Is there any danger to humans from cheetahs? Do cheetahs ever target people as prey?
Cheetahs aren't considered an aggressive animal. They believe in flight versus fight. And so you can actually run up and chase them away from anything. And so many of the tribes throughout Africa have actually followed the cheetah and had them help feed their families. The San Bushmen, for instance, have a very long history working with cheetahs, and they are not aggressive, so they're not considered to be a problem like many of the other cats are.
So why do you think among the big cats, the cheetah has become sort of pushed to the side conservation-wise historically?
I think people think of them as the fastest land animal, and for some reason, when you're big or fast, maybe you think that somebody's taking care of them. We also think about animals in protected reserves, and so if it's an African animal, it's probably in a protected reserve. And so I think the biggest problem for the cheetah is the fact that it's outside of protected areas, putting it in conflict with humans. And that's the thing that people don't realize, is that Africa is not just a big game reserve. There are protected areas. There is a huge human population. Most of the people have lots of livestock, and many of them are still pastoral and migratory. So I think those are the main problems, is that people don't realize how the cheetah lives and where it lives, and that it does suffer from not only the conflict with humans, but many of these other problems, as in the lack of genetic diversity. But even today, we have problems with the illegal wildlife pet trade, which has been a big problem for the cheetah, is little cheetah cubs are poached out of the bush. And because they're not a big, powerful, aggressive animal, they become a pet illegally in the pet trade. For every one cheetah that makes it into the pet trade, 4 or 5 of them die because they are such a vulnerable species. And if they do make it into the pet trade, the people don't usually know how to take care of the animals, and they have a lifespan of maybe a year or 2. At that point, maybe they've fallen in love with the animal because it was cute and it purrs, and want to go get another one. So we have been actively involved in trying to stop the illegal wildlife pet trade. And much of the work that we've done in Namibia, we've now put into place into an area called Somaliland, which is a breakaway country from Somalia that is not even a recognized country. But they, as a country, have worked together on trying to help stop the trade, working with us, a lot of confiscations. It is the closest country into the Middle East where a lot of the illegal wildlife pet trade goes. And so we've now had to develop another reserve up in Somaliland as well. So it's pretty interesting, all the problems facing the cheetah today.
Well, thank you so much for the work that you do for these cheetahs. They're outstanding animals, and they're pretty lucky to have you, I think.
Well, thank you. Well, I will also welcome everyone to join me.
How can they do that? How can I, in Boston, help cheetahs in Namibia?
Well, we do have a U.S. non-for-profit. It's called Cheetah Conservation Fund, and you can go to our website, cheetah.org. Spread the word through awareness, like you are doing. We do a lot of work together with a lot of the universities. So I have a lot of interns that come over to Namibia and work with us. So many of them are getting master's or PhD programs. We have chapters throughout the country where people get involved to, again, help us raise money and spread the word on saving the cheetah helps in making the world a better place. So we welcome people to get involved with us. You can come and visit us in Namibia, too. You can take a tour and see Africa's wildlife.
If you're twisting my arm, I guess maybe I might take you up on that offer.
And we have a great research and education center in Namibia on about 150,000 acres of pristine land, and see all the different wildlife species and learn more about our work and how we're working together with our communities in Namibia to save the cheetah for future generations.
Dr. Marker, thank you so much. This has been a
Thank you.
pleasure.